the only pipe that went in. They were used somewhat limited in limited fashion on some of the more budget conscious builds. So that they showed up in a lot of condos where cost was an issue. And you might not find those in a high-end luxury mansion per se. So the exposure was limited. Again, not taking away from the fact that it is a huge burden and stress when they're um, present. So our recommendations back to the legislature are to recommend creating an awareness campaign on the different sites, and I don't haven't identified them all, but just two that come to mind: Department of Housing, Department of Consumer Protection, around the makeup of these pipes. Recommend creating best practices for basically a buyer beware, for having resources for the homeowners before they buy. And we talked about perhaps adding that to a section on the residential property report, knowing that that's not going to cover the condos in the as we alluded to last meeting. I believe that a property inspector, home inspector, doesn't want the liability of inspecting the common spaces at a condo. It just opens up a whole can of worms for liability. So chances are that may not pick up all of them, but I want homeowners to, prospective homeowners to know that these pipes do exist, that they could be found in a residential setting, and just to be aware of what they're about. Perhaps some resources in terms of how to address if found after the purchase. You buy a house and you find that you have these pipes. Um, who to call, what to do, how to identify them, perhaps, and then maybe help with finding a professional. And again, I'm thinking of a younger version of me, first time home buyer, not knowing much, not being in the construction industry at that time. What things would I want to have available to me? We also talked as a group about recommending education to the condo association. So I know, Dan, you've mentioned a couple times, not understanding why this wouldn't be part of the condo docs if it's a known liability. So I'd like to recommend that we have education given to the condo associations that they should be perhaps including these as part of their condo docs. So that's about as far as I got in terms of documenting what we've discussed, because I'm trying to bring this home. I want to be able to deliver something, hopefully right around the turn of, new year. We definitely have to have it done before session begins in February. And so I'd like to bring some recommendations back that then the legislature can run with. So I open up the floor here to what did I miss? What do we need to add? What is in there that shouldn't be in there? Do we need to add more detail to? And so,
Okay, I do have a couple of thoughts here.
yeah,
I still don't think the residential property condition report's going to help you. I think it's already covered as well as it can be.
okay.
But I do have two concerns that I kind of came up with.
Yep.
Beverly, did you receive the email I just resent to you a few minutes ago? Um, Here is something where we may need an attorney to review some wording
Mm-hmm.
because of the new Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac uh, method of handling condominiums. Uh, this issue, if the condo association is aware of it, is supposed to be anything on the catastrophic side or substantial dollar side
Mm-hmm.
is supposed to be disclosed in the resale certificate. And at this point, if it's big enough, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will not purchase the loans anymore, which will create a potential problem because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are one of the biggest suppliers of money for home purchases. Um, and that rule was actually put in place because of the condos down in Florida with the deferred maintenance issues
Yep.
that the association ended up getting hit with. With that, the other question that I would ask, and this would be an attorney question, this is not a me question, but something that I was talking to an attorney about. And his answer to me was, does the association members, the board members, have any potential liability because of the association being aware of this issue and not disclosing it in the resale certificate and to the association buyers? Do they have any liability in this? Because they're the ones that are supposed to be making sure that everything is represented accurately. And quite honestly, I'm not playing attorney. I jokingly say I watched one on TV, but I'm not an attorney.
Mhm.
But I think somebody needs to answer those couple of questions, because frankly, how those issues are perceived or are answered by somebody with a higher level than me could potentially put a twist on this that could get pretty awkward fast.
Mhm.
I think one of the things, Dan brings up a good point about the potential liability for board members. And as a board member, I would be concerned about this. We do have errors and omissions, acting in our capacity as board members. But then the other thing comes down to, Dan, there's a degree of subjectivity here as to when does a potential problem rise to the level of being noticeable to in the sales package, and when is a potential problem just that, a potential problem that hasn't risen and raised its ugly head yet, but we're aware of the fact, for instance, that there might be PB pipe in the property. Does that need to be disclosed if it hasn't been a catastrophic issue, or if there has been some catastrophic failures? Does it need to be disclosed that they were here, they've been addressed, they've been mitigated? We still have some pipe on site. I think that again goes to an attorney, because that's subjective.
Right.
One board, I sit on a board of 9 members. We may feel this year that it's not a catastrophic issue and we don't need to put it in the resale packages. And next year there could be a couple of new people sitting on the board, and it gets voted the other way because it is, subjective. I think we need to look at, the fact that they're there in and of itself isn't catastrophic, but it is something that new buyers should be aware of. So where do you draw the line there? We've had a problem or we have a potential problem, that type of thing.
Right. And it's interesting because if you look at it, especially knowing the product was designed with a 30-year life.
Right.
I mean, I guess I'm equating it to a roof. If I've got it 45 years on a 30-year roof, it's pretty safe to say that, even though it's not leaking, I'm not going to do well.
Right.
I got a roof coming. So I don't know. I almost feel like I need a little input from an attorney that specializes in associations, that specializes in condo law, because I think we need to be careful on this one, because this could blow back and create awkwardness that I don't think we're trying to make a situation worse.
Well, I wonder if that's, and I'm questioning whether that's our job here as part of this group, to bring in an attorney. I mean, I think that my proposal was to, there's continuing education that the condo boards, that's offered every year at multiple opportunities for condo boards, and property managers for sure have certain number of continuing education credits. And so somehow my recommendation was to recommend education that these exist, that this could be a liability, and let the condo boards and the property managers consult an attorney, versus, because it could be different case by case. My tact was to recommend education on the subject, and allow that to maybe filter into the continuing education piece of it that they're required to take.
And I think that's critical. And we mentioned that several meetings back, that awareness and education is going to be a big part of what I think this panel needs to recommend, because there are so many people that would be first-time buyers or investors that aren't aware of the need to look for this type of pipe. So.
Right. So, so as far as bringing in, I did sit with the condo association again a couple months back, and the attorneys on the call, they were back and forth, and the insurance people, whether this rose to the, it was inconclusive as to whether this must be put on the condo docs. And so I don't want this group to say it must be, when you've got attorneys who weren't in agreement whether it should or shouldn't. But I think the education we certainly can recommend education and awareness about this. And perhaps can work with condo association to figure out how, and I'm not even sure where my role, we're going to recommend our findings, and then I'm not sure beyond that. This being my first time running chairing a committee and a working group, then the legislature has to go and kind of make some,
Right.
kind of connect the engine with the drive shaft. So that piece of it, I'm not aware as to where it goes from here. I see Beverly connecting. Beverly, do you have input on this? Or are you just saying hello? Okay, she's muted. At any rate,
I think I would be apprehensive if we left the residential property condition report in there.
Okay.
And because again, I think you'll find you've already got it covered under the other, do you have any plumbing issues?
Yep.
And unfortunately, the first time somebody finds out that it was in the wall, not in the unit, the inspector didn't see it, but the seller claimed it wasn't there or thought that it wasn't there, we're going to see a couple of attorneys duke it out, and we're going to put sellers in an awkward position.
Okay.
I think it's already covered enough by the plumbing questions. If we're sitting there talking about the fact that awareness is it, then I think for the home inspectors definitely aren't missing it where they're inspecting. I think the other recommendation regarding the educating the associations.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. And as far as how that gets, again, how do we, we're making a recommendation here that this occur. Right. And so I think we want to, the next step, which I'm unsure of, is to how do we get that so that that's included in, there are certain, there's ethics, there are certain required courses for a property manager to take. And I believe the Department of Consumer Protection, it may be the Community Association Institute, that may be the governing body. I need to figure that out. But wherever who's ever issuing the designation, we want to lobby them to include awareness around this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Playing devil's advocate, if I could for a minute, Dan, I'm not sure on whether or not to include this in the residential property condition report, but as a new investor or a first-time home buyer and so forth, without that being on, I mean, just a one-liner, are you aware of any PV pipe, on the premises or serving this property? It could be a one-liner like that, and it'd be a yes, no. Short of that being on the condition report, how does this committee propose making a first-time home buyer or an investor or a property buyer? How do we propose making them aware of the need to look for this if it's not something that's included on something like the checklist?
Quite honestly, your home inspectors are already quite aware of this, and they're aware of this and about 8,000 other issues that aren't on the property condition report that they're trained to look for and explain to that same first-time buyer or the investor. If that first-time buyer or investor chose to buy with no inspections, I got to tell you, they made a business decision, and it wouldn't be one I would make. But I don't see. I can see it putting it there as just confusing the water. I think the home inspectors are more than aware of this issue. And if you wanted to check with ASHI or CAHI, I'd be willing to bet you they've all educated their members quite well on this issue.
That was my next question. Can we perhaps find out whether or not the home inspector, so that it's not on the property condition report, can we in fact find out that the home inspectors, building inspectors have this on their radar in the form of a checklist that they use that we don't necessarily see?
I can tell you that the ones that I use, absolutely. But the one I use, I'll be honest with you, I tend to use inspectors that have been in the business for 20 years or more. I don't believe in using kids that are still cutting their teeth on my mistakes, on my clients making their mistakes. So I tend to go with the more experienced guys. The thing to do would be to reach out to ASHI and CAHI and ask them if they've educated the members on this issue. I don't want to sit there and state it as a fact when I'm not sitting in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe they have, because this is an issue that particularly in the heater, the hotter issue, time-wise of this was discussed regularly.
And
Hi, can I add something?
sure,
So as people are becoming first home buyers, wouldn't it suffice? Because there's some families who have to go through Connecticut home programs. Could we get them to say something about it to ensure that families get a home inspection? Because honestly, I can tell you, I didn't have one. I was talked out of getting one when I went through the program, not by them, but by the company I used to help me get my home. So maybe that could be a secondary person that says, hey, make sure you get a home inspection, and just to make sure everybody's on the same page, because there are going to be a lot of families who can't afford to get a home inspection. And we got to make it a requirement if there's first time home buyers.
the lender that's a lender requirement, wouldn't it be?
Actually,
Not necessarily.
Huh.
When I went through my real estate company, I didn't. They were like, "No, it should be fine. It's a condo." But now that we're talking, I wish I had gotten a home inspection.
well, I
'Cause
got to
I
tell
don't-
you, your FHA does have a thing in their documents that they send you that you sign that says they do recommend a home inspection. You can choose not to
but
do it, but it's in their documents.
I know. But I'm
Fannie
saying
and Freddie do not require it at all.
and I may have gone through them. So just that some people, even in a training class, first time home buyers, they mention this so that they know what's going on too behind the scenes. That's just my 2 cents in. Because I was young and a lot of young people don't know.
Again, the funny part is, I probably would have said yes on what we were saying 25 years ago when it was so dominant. This was a hot issue at that point. We were seeing a lot of that plumbing, and we became aware it had an issue. It's become as a percentage of market, such a small percentage of the market concern now, because again, most of it's been replaced.
And that's the other thing. I'm not sure, so I'm gonna have to go to different condo associations around here in the Groton area to find out, to make sure that, hey, did these get changed out? Like I said, mine was built in 1974. Branford Manor, a HUD housing built in 1974, has mold issues. So I don't know. Thank you. I just have to see
Okay.
what we can do for the rest of the people.
If
Yeah,
you were to use the contracts that most of the state is using, the Greater Hartford Association of Realtors contract is the one that's being recommended now by the state to be used as the state association as the recommended contract. And section 17, you got two boxes, and that is buyer elects for the following inspections, or the buyer waives the inspections under these situations, under this section. And frankly, it's pretty much a notice to the buyer that there's an option here. If you choose to waive it, you took a risk, but
I understand that, but as a
Yeah.
young buyer who was barely making it and decides to stop being in a apartment, a lot of people don't realize that. You take these classes. I bought my home condo in 2009. I don't know all the steps, and unless you have the right people guiding you, you don't know. So I guess I understand now it's on me, but on the same token, I don't want other young families to go through this.
I think to Juliet's point, the young buyer, the first time buyer that's coming in, just barely able to put together the funds to do a closing and so forth. We can dump that cost of the home inspection. That just brings down the closing costs that much more, makes it a little bit more affordable. And they may do that because, well, this is an existing building that's already been inspected by somebody before. They may not see the risk, I think, is maybe what, and I'm not speaking for her, but I think I see her point. first time buyers, new buyers, young buyers, buyers that are just getting by may opt to not do the inspection at their peril, thinking that, well, it's already, the building has already been done before. I'm not the first buyer. And maybe that's where, one of the functions of this group might be to make sure that when one makes that decision, you're making that decision with an informed consent that, these are the things that could be missed if an inspection is not done, even if it's a repeat inspection, even if it's a resale on a house that's been inspected and sold 2 or 3 previous times. I think that just reinforces my point that somehow I think this board wants to make sure that the education piece gets out there to anybody who's going to be signing on a mortgage, anybody who's going to be taking on any risk. Make sure that somehow, if it's not in the condition report, make sure that somehow there is a way that we make sure that first-time buyers, any new buyers, that we make sure that any purchasers are aware of the incredible need for an inspection, and if you waive it, the types of things that could be missed, including something like this, albeit, and I agree with Dan's point also, that this problem has seemed to have subsided quite a bit because of this product has aged out and already caused a lot of its problems. Not that there isn't still more to come, but it's not as prominent as it was. But still, it is an issue, as are a few other things. So can we try to find a way to make sure that the inherent risk of not doing a proper inspection, and the inherent risks of not being aware of what you might get missed if you don't do one, this is part of the educational component, I guess.
I can tell you, and again, this would go by office policy. If you choose to purchase something without a home inspection, I make you sign a document that says I recommended you have a home inspection and you chose to waive it. And the interesting part is 99% of the time when I haul that piece of paper out, they decide to do it with a home inspection.
Yep.
That's not necessarily industry standard, though, is it?
The form is an industry standard form that agents have the right to use.
Okay, all right, but it's not an obligatory form.
It's not mandatory.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
good. It's just good practice,
Sure. Yeah.
especially if you have a conscience like I do.
So if it's good practice, why can't we make it mandatory? It would be a good idea to make it mandatory then, so that everybody's protected and we're not doing what we're doing now.
Well, are you saying that you want to mandate having a home inspection, Juliet? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so. I think that would be safe for everyone. We won't get into this type of dilemma that we're facing now, because it's going to be that board members, especially with condo association, change over time. Now, I know some of them still live here. The older board members might be here, but they've changed property management companies 4 to 5 times. So does everybody still forward all the documentation saying this has been done, that has been done? So to protect everyone, I think everybody needs to get a home inspection no matter what. It's just protecting everyone, the owner, the seller.
What if we made the form that Dan's talking about? What, if an inspection is waived, what if we made the form, acknowledging the waiver and the risk? What if we made that form mandatory instead, so that parties that don't, that are well aware of it? I'm not a first time buyer. I have a few properties. If I go look for another property, I may waive an inspection because after buying and working in so many buildings, I know what I'm looking for. And I've walked away from buildings without even having an inspector involved. So instead of mandating the inspection, can we mandate the use of the waiver form if an inspection is waived? Perhaps
the only challenge whenever we mandate something is even mandating the form gets complicated, because not every real estate agent is a realtor. So where we have a state standard that we're using for a form, it's not a mandatory contract. So unfortunately, the looseness of the difference between a realtor and a real estate agent is so big that you mandate it. Who's going to monitor it? Who's going to figure it out? Who's going to make sure that the agent that isn't a realtor actually knows? How do you even do this?
Because it's a realtor form. That what you're saying, right? It's a realtor form, not a
Correct.
real
It's a
estate agent
realtor
form.
form that we get through our association.
Yeah. You know,
Just
I'm
like
not,
the contract, quite honestly, our contract is licensed. A non-realtor doesn't even have the right to use it.
right. Yeah. You know, I am comfortable and all for education. You know, if we recommend a home inspection and perhaps elaborate on the reasons why, I'm all for recommending the use of a similar form. I'm not, yeah, I can't support mandating something because I think there are, with the limited scope of this group, I don't think there are probably unintended consequences that'll come up down the road if we mandate something where
Yep.
there'll be 4 or 5 things that we didn't think of, and the experts in the field are going to come back and say, now you've created an issue that we didn't anticipate. So I'm really
Well,
that I
can I
can't
give you a
support as
perfect example?
sure.
When the indemnity company mandated a form of inspection to be done, initially it was engineers only or a core sample. And because there were so few engineers and it wasn't home inspectors, all of a sudden the cost to inspect that foundation was $1,500, $2,000. It was big. And once we created the class allowing home inspectors to qualify to do the foundation inspection if they took the class, the $1,500 suddenly became $300 to $400. So frankly, you mandate,
Yeah,
the
we could be
cost gets out of control fast.
yeah, we could be creating more undue burdens for a prospective home buyer,
Correct.
yeah, adding costs that so that there's a good example. I certainly am all for, you know, eyes wide open that a first time home buyer needs to, you know, should be aware, have the resources of knowledge in front of them, and that's why I'm recommending education over a mandate. Just because there's at least 5 things we're probably not thinking of, and it's probably more like 20 that we're going to cause more problems than that don't exist. Will cause a different set of problems potentially.
Steve, I can send you that form, by the way, that I mentioned. I can send that to Beverly later today.
Please, yep, please.
It's interesting too, Dan, you point out that that's a realtor form and a real estate agent
Correct.
may not have or use that form. So there's to Steve's point, there is a reason why mandating something, you know,
Right.
and that's one of the problems we see with legislation quite often is it comes down and there's unintended consequences, and we certainly don't want to be recommending that. So let's focus on the awareness and the education campaign side.
But I can take that form and include it in our packet back as a packet of recommendations with a form that covers similar criteria. Doesn't, you know, that maybe it's not a realtor form, but that identifies some of these, you know, that covers this key criteria of awareness that somebody should have an inspection performed, and it would be in the same spirit as this realtor form. I think we maybe just use it as an example, if nothing else. But I would like to. Hey, we did our homework. We were thoughtful about this. I don't think, you know, I don't believe we can solve every, and we can't stop every issue from coming forward. We can't solve everything, but we can certainly, if people are aware and the knowledge is there, yeah, they're one, in my opinion, they're one step better than they were before this group got together. And, you know, I wasn't planning to solve everything. I just think there's so many things out there. Tyron, are you? Do I see your name popping up here? I've got a weird screen here. So does anybody saw Tyron's name pop up at the bottom? Somebody have their hand up or? Okay. At any rate, so this is by and large what I'm looking to present is awareness. You know, whether that goes in a handbook, whether it goes on the Department of Consumer Protection, Department of Housing website. I think we can make recommendations and then allow, you know, allow the different organizations to, you know, to determine the best way to get the information out.
Steve, if you would like, I could also probably get you the name of some of the leadership from CAHI, in which that is the Connecticut Association of Home Inspectors. And you could ask them, you know, the question that brought up here is, are they aware and are they educating their members on this issue? Which I'm sure the answer is yes, but you know, as I said earlier, I don't want to speak for a room I didn't sit in.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just curious how we would Yeah, I think if the state is mandating continuing education, at least that we verify that this is part of the topic of discussion, or recommend that it be included in the topic of discussion for the condos, for the home inspectors, realtors, perhaps. That is somehow included in a continuing education. I think that would, for me, that would go a long way to make sure that the people who do this every day, sometimes you become an expert in something and you forget what it was like to be that first time home buyer. So just a reminder to bring it to their attention, like, hey, you should be asking about this. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's another recommendation we could make. All
right.
So are we on the right track here? I mean, again,
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know that I can't say that we're going to cover everything, but I'm trying to, I tried best I could do to document and memorialize everything that we discussed, and also create a reasonable set of, kind of a to-do list after it leaves this group. That's something that's attainable, that may help somebody down the road. Without a ton of mandates, a lot of there may be no enforcement here, but I think that the goal was around, and even in the legislation, the goal was around education and awareness. So
Actually, I have something here that I just remembered.
Yep.
The joke, you forget more than, okay, forget it. Page 8 of the Connecticut property condition report.
Yeah.
That is mandated. Buyer is urged to carefully inspect the property and, if desired, have the property inspected by an expert. The buyer understands that there are areas of the property which the seller has no knowledge, and this report does not encompass those areas. Buyer acknowledges that the buyer's read and received a signed copy of this report. So it is in there already about recommending a home inspection. And that's on page 8. It's under the last paragraph, and it's called buyer certification.
Okay.
So I hate to say this, if the buyer's not reading what they're signing, that's a little awkward.
Yep. And I've got page 8 here because you sent the new version. Yep. Well, I don't know. That's subsection I. Could we recommend that becomes maybe a little more prominently, like on page 1, towards the top in bold?
You want me to tell you how actually the boldness, where it falls on the pages doesn't matter. It is the boldness issue.
Okay.
Believe me, we just did a little thing on the Connecticut Association of Realtors creating a new document. And we actually did a test and we found out that bold doesn't do it. We gray toned a box around it. And guess what? That is actually more of an eye catcher than the bolding was.
Okay.
I could send you an example of what we did too, because it's kind of a cool document.
Like this. Something like that. That's the buyer's.
Yeah. I'll send you all of that and you can forward it to the other members because unfortunately you're looking at it, they're not. So
Yeah, true. Yep. I printed it out many weeks ago when you pointed out that I printed out an old one. So I got the new one now. Both of them are available on the state's maybe in an archive page, but I printed out one from apparently like 2005. All right, what else? Again, that's the tact I'd like to take. I would like to summarize this. I can send it back out to the group for kind of, I don't want to say once and final, but I would, like to say that, if we haven't unearthed anything, groundbreaking or something that is completely different than what we've discussed, I'd like to get this summarized and get it back out in a report identifying. So maybe what I'll do is I'll send this out through Beverly to forward to the group and review. I'd like to get this out sometime next week, if not right after the first of the year. I don't have a schedule to meet next week between Christmas and New Year's, but I would certainly take any input, even in a group setting, if it's a reply all, like, hey, I think we should add, I'm open to having a discussion between now and then. But I would like to get something out the door with our recommendations, barring anything earth-shattering that comes up between now and over the next few weeks, as people are starting to think, well, hey, I didn't see that on the list, let's add it. Is that reasonable?
It is. And looking at that property condition report, section I right now, Dan's right. And I forgot that does appear there as well. One of the things that I do with leases in certain forms where I want to make sure that somebody acknowledges having seen that particular area of a form, and is I have them initial that area. So I put like an initial box or an initial line side of it. There are certain aspects of my lease that I go through the entire lease every time I do a rent. But there are certain aspects of it that I make them initial, that they've read it and understood it and had a chance to ask questions. This might be one of those areas where, you've mentioned display a bold or boxed out section. Maybe it should be an initial box also, that the buyer initials here and the realtor or agent initials with them, acknowledging that, that this is read and understood. And that would highlight, if you're waiving the inspection, then the problem's on you if one arises,
Yeah, we want education and also buyer beware.
Yeah, I think that's Dan. Thanks for. I forgot that was in there. Thank you.
So, anyhow, that would be my to-do list, and to get this back out to the group by next Tuesday. This week is pretty jammed up. I might have time this Friday to do a little bit more summary and send it out. So let's just say I'll either send it out Friday or Tuesday to Beverly to forward to the group, and no later than Tuesday, and then I'll look for feedback by the end of next week. In which case, receiving nothing new, then I'll forward this on with our recommendation back to the next step in the process. And again, I believe it goes right back to I got to follow the chain of command, but at any rate, our report will be ready to submit.
Excellent.
So,
okay,
that's it's kind of, appreciate the input, and if anybody's got anything offline or something comes up between now and then that you didn't think of, I'm certainly open to hearing it. But let me try to summarize this by the end of the week and get it out through Beverly to the rest of you. And anything else up for discussion today? All right. Without hearing none, I'd like to wish you all happy holidays. I hope that you have great time with your family and friends, and relaxing, because I know there are a lot of people I'm talking to, they're buzzing out. If not now, they're checking out mentally. By Friday, physically, they'll be checked out, and nobody wants to talk to me next week about work. So I wish the same for you. Hopefully you have an uneventful and enjoyable week, and hopefully have a good one. So I'm not sure if we will reconvene, but I will get this information back out to you all for review. And if we need to, we will, but I'd like to get it out the door. So thank you. Have a great rest of the day and great holiday.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy
Right on.
holidays.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.